Hi, I'm B-Boy Bill, and this is the Layen's Hive build. I first heard about the Layen's Hive in an article written by Dr. Leo Sharaskin in the Bee Culture magazine. Dr. Leo has an awesome website with a ton of plans, tons of free plans, which I based this design off of. As I did some research into this, I decided I would do mine a little bit differently based on Dr. Leo's designs, and you can see in the link below. It's pretty similar with a couple modifications. One, I went with a 19 frame. His plans call for 14 frames. I wanted a couple extra frames in there so I could do a couple different things. One of the things I wanted to do is be able to overwinter 2 separate colonies in here, and I wanted to give each side enough room for that. The other thing is my ventilation holes are a little bit different as well. You can also find links to the tools I used in the description below. And if you thought this video was good and you'd like to see more, click the subscribe button. It'll help out a lot. I've got all the parts laid out here we need for our Layen's Hive. The first thing we want to do is start by cross-cutting our 2x10s. We're going to need 2 different sizes to make the pieces, but we're going to need 4 unique parts. These 4 2x10s are going to be 29 by 11/16, and these 4 over here are going to be 16 by 11/16. So we'll go ahead and cross-cut these, and we'll come back and show you the next step. The next thing you want to do is go over to your table saw and rip all these down to 9 1/8 inches thick. That's the size of this whole piece. The next step, after you rip them all down to 9 1/8 inch thick wide, is to go ahead and make the tongue. The tongue is going to be 1/2 by 1/2, and you can put it right in the center of your 2x10 there. For your tongue, we're going to do 2 of the longer boards and 2 of the shorter boards, all with the tongue on them. I'll get my table saw set up for that, and we'll be right back. The next step, we need to make a groove in their 2x10s. This holds the tongue. These 2 pieces will go together like this. We're going to get our table saw set up for the tongue cut, and we're going to go ahead and make a tongue cut in 2 of our long boards and the other 2 short boards. Once we have all our tongues and all our grooves made, then we're going to go ahead and make some rabbets. You can see that this bottom board has a rabbet cut out of it. To do this, you can use a router, you can use a table saw and a chisel. I've tried both. I think the router works best. So go ahead and get your router set up. You'll probably have to make 2 passes unless you have a really thick bit to get this bottom groove on the end boards. Once you got the rabbets cut in your 2 end boards, go ahead and take the long board with the tongue on it and go ahead and make the rabbet right there. These together are going to hold your bottom board. The bottom board sits right in there. Okay, now you're done with the tongue pieces. You can set those aside, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the groove pieces. Short board groove piece, done. You don't even need to mess with that one. What you do need to do is take the long groove pieces and cut out for your frame rest. All the frames in our Layen's Hive are going to sit right on this rest. That's it, we're done with the sides and the ends. Next thing we're going to do is cut the bottom board. The bottom board is made out of 1x8s. Basically what you want to do is cross cut these to the right length. And go ahead and put a tongue and groove just like you did on the sides, but for this one, we're only going to run it about a 1/4 inch thick. Once you get that together, they should fit nice together for your bottom board. The last step in the Layen's Hive is to make the top pieces. So the top pieces are also made from 1x8s. You can see here, if you lay these out, just about the width of one of your 1x8s. which works perfect, is you can get 2 long pieces for the top, 2 short pieces for the top, and also your rests for the top. The first thing you want to do is go ahead and cross cut all the length your top pieces. These pieces here are going to be a product left over from cutting the top pieces. Once you get it together, it's going to sit on your hive just like that. This is the last piece to our Layen's hive. It's a 1/4 inch piece of Layen. I went ahead and used the rip cut and the table saw to make these. When we get these all together, we'll set it right on our hive. That's it. Now that you've got everything cut, let's go ahead and get this thing together. All right, we went ahead and drilled our holes into our 2x10 ends for the bottom. Again, this is the tongue side we're working with. And you're going to want to pre-drill 6 holes into there just to make your life a little easier. I'm using a 1/8 inch drill bit because I'm going to be putting these 3-inch long screws They're number 9s in here. I also have some glue out. This is Type-On 3. It's been working really good. I'm going to go ahead and get these glued up and screwed. I like to build these upside down. That way my next layer will be nice and flush. So I go ahead and set them on the tongue. Get them nice and square. And I like to pre-drill the holes into here too. At least get one of your holes pre-drilled in here, and then we'll go ahead and drill the other ones once we get it screwed together. All right, we're going to go ahead and get our first screw in here. Once we get our first screw in, we're going to drill the next hole. That'll help keep it square for us. And we'll go ahead and pre-drill our last hole. All right, it's basically going to be the same thing for the other sides. So I'll go ahead and get that done, and we'll be right back and talk about the next part. All right, we got our bottom sides done. We're going to go ahead and dry fit our bottom here. What I'm looking for on this is to make sure my corners are either chiseled out or routed over enough to fit in, and everything looks good. So we're going to go ahead and get these glued together and put into the box. If you notice, before I put the board on, I'm smearing this glue out nice and smooth over all these edges. This glue will be the key to keep our bottom board in. All right, last but not least, we're going to glue the tongue and groove of our bottom board together. When I put my bottom board in, I like to pick the best side to go out, because the outside is what's going to get painted, and the bees don't really care what their bottom board looks like on the inside. We'll fix this bottom board. There she is. Looks pretty good. Pop this out a little bit and see if I can't just adjust it a little bit more. About as even as we're going to get. All right, we've got a Porter cable staple gun loaded up with some 1.5 inch staples. I'm going to go ahead and tack this bottom board down. I try to keep it at a slight angle as it's going in because I don't want to be putting staples down through that are going to be hitting my fingers. You probably do your staples every 4 inches or so. Try to wipe the big spots of glue off. All right, here's the bottom half of our Layen's hive. I'm gonna go ahead and get the boards and we'll get the next part done. All right, the first thing we need to do with our bottom is get the glue on it. You put a whole bunch on this top piece, you can smash it down. It goes right down where you want it to. Make sure you get a lot on there, more than you'd ever use. Take a piece of scrap, start smashing it down. Should fall right onto the sides and bottom for you. You pretty much know you got enough on if you're making a mess everywhere. All right, next thing we're gonna do is take one of our end boards. The end ones don't matter which side's in, so pick the smoothest side to go out. And we'll take one of our long sides. The long side, you want to make sure you have the rabbet in. We'll put it right on top of our other board there. Here's a critical step that I learned the hard way. Make sure that you put your long side on before you put the end on. One other step, we're going to put our glue right down the side here. See that? That means you got enough. what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the edges. We're going to give this one a head start here. Okay. A little bit more. Alright, we're going to go ahead and pre-drill our holes here using that 1/8 inch drill bit again. So we'll go ahead and put one in the top. Once you have the top one in, I pre-drill the other 2 holes. I'll go ahead and get those screwed. One last thing I like to do before I go ahead and put the final board in is make sure the frames are going to fit in there and they're not going to be too tight. That's it for our bottom. Now we'll go ahead and do the top. Alright, I've got the pieces laid out for the top here. First thing we're going to do is build the frame. To do that, we got our stapler loaded up with 1.5 inch staples again. And we're going to just line it up on the top here. That's how the top's going to go. So I'll go ahead and get the frame built for the top. Pretty simple procedure we're going to do here. A little bit of glue on the ends. Smear it around a little bit. A little bit more glue. Okay, what I like to do is put the one end under there just to support it. We're going to flush up this end here. 1.5 inch staples. I like to put in 3. We'll do the same thing with the other end. And 3 of our staples in here. Now we have that done, I'm just going to go ahead and do the other side. We'll glue both of these at once. Put our side on. Three staples. This is the part where you make sure it's nice and square to this edge. So I'm going to twist it a little bit. We're going to put one in first. Push this end in. That's that. Now, lastly, we need to put the 1/4 inch Layen on top. This will square everything up nice for us. It's going to go just like this, but we are going to change out our 1.5 inch staples and switch it out to a 5/8 inch staple. You can use 5/8, 3/4. only go through 1/4 inch, and the glue should hold it anyway. So we'll get our frame all glued up here. Okay. Go ahead and lay a 1/4 inch Layen on top of this. We'll put our first staple in. Go to this corner. Staple in here. Right down the edge every 4 to 5 inches. I want to make sure this edge is nice and square. One of your edges should be perfectly square. And make sure your frame's square. Start the opposite corner, 4 or 5 inches, put a few of these in. There it is, top to our Layen's hive. Go ahead and wipe the rest of this glue off. All right, one last step to this Layen's hive and the lid. We need to put the aluminum flashing on. I'm not going to put the aluminum flashing on until I get it painted. So let me go ahead and get this painted, and we'll be right back and we'll get the aluminum flashing on. Hi, I'm B-Boy Bill, and this is the Layen's hive build. Alright, now that we got the bottom of our hive together, we're going to go ahead and put our holes in for the entrances and our bottom vents. We're going to start by using a 1/2 inch drill bit. I'm using a spade bit here. We're going to put 2 holes through our hive entrances here. We'll start by drilling the first hole. And then the second hole. Okay. Get this side here. Alright. Now, the entrance hole is going to be 3.5 inches from our outside edge. It's going to be 4 inches long, and it's going to be a 1/2 inch thick. Now that we have our holes drilled, we're going to go ahead and use the saw to cut the rest of the entrance hole out. Okay, we'll go ahead and do this one next. Alright, our entrance holes are done. We're going to go ahead and cut the holes at the bottom. The holes in the bottom are 7 inches from the ends, they're 1.5 inches long, and they're 1/2 inch wide. We're going to start with the same way by using our 1/2 inch drill bit. Let's go ahead and put a hole down through. And do both ends of these. And I'll go ahead and complete these holes with the saw. Now that we have our 2 entrance holes and our vent holes in the bottom, we're going to go ahead and put the ridge around the top that our lid sits on. Now that we've got our holes cut for our entrances and our vent holes, we need to install the lid that's going to hold our top. In order to do that, we're going to be using these pieces that were left over from cutting out the top. And we've gone ahead and beveled the edge with the joiner at a 45-degree angle. This will provide a drip edge should any water get underneath that edge of the top cover. One thing that I've already done is I've marked the hive in all four corners at a 1/2 inch. That's how the spacing we're going to have below the top here. We're going to assemble the ridge right on there, like just about like that. And then the water should shed right off of there. I'm going to start on the ends using our Type-On 3 again. And our Porter cable stapler with 1.5 inch staples. Put some glue right on this bar here. And we'll get it nice and spread out with the scrap piece of wood. Now, I'm going to line it up so that drip edge is facing the outside and the top. And we're going to put it right on our marks, making the ends flush with the hive. I'll put one staple in this end. I'll put one staple in this end. I'll put a few end here. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these, and we'll be right back to do the next part. This ridge will be a nice place for our top to rest on. All right, we're on to our flashing part of the project. For this, I got a couple tips for you. Number one, gloves. Definitely need some gloves. This stuff is sharp. You'll end up cutting your hands. Number two, get a clamp. When you open this stuff, it's like a giant spring. It wants to go everywhere. Our hive top is 34.5 inches. So we're going to go ahead and make this 2 inches longer. That gives us 1 inch on either side for a 36.5 inch top. In order to do that, I've got a couple tricks. One is I put a mark on the bench here, 36.5. I'm going to put one across the top too, and then I'll know right where to line my straight edge up. I put the flashing flush with one side of my bench. I'll put a straight edge across that mark on the other side. Lastly, we're going to take a regular old roofing carpet knife, whatever you call it, and we're going to trace this line right across here at the 36.5 inch mark. 2 is all you should need. Once you have that done, go ahead, lift it up, and get that crease started. There you go. Now to attach the flashing to the lid, we're going to go ahead and use a power shot stapler. Nothing fancy, gets the job done. Got some 3/8 inch staples loaded in here. Right now I'm just centering this up on the flashing. It's not an exact science. I suppose you could measure it, you could use a brake. The way I do it, I get the one edge started. And once I get the one corner up, go ahead and put a staple in there. I'll run the staples right along this edge. This is like a spring, it wants to pull right off, so you gotta keep right on it. you have a couple in, you should be able to turn it up on its edge and then finish across the top here. First edge is done. We'll put it back down. Start bending up this edge. Next step we're going to do is fold the ends up like a little Christmas present. Once you have the corners folded in, and go ahead and get a staple in there. Go ahead and flatten out the rest of the side. Fold it over. And we'll get that stapled in as well. What I'm doing here is finish and flatten out the corners. And I'm pounding the staples in the rest of the way. This is like a giant spring trying to pull these staples out, and I want to make sure they don't come out. Go ahead and make our little Christmas present on this end. I like to fold them in like that, and then no water can get down in between there. I'll show you on this one. So you have your corners folded in. Go ahead, fold over your whole edge. Go ahead and get this staple. There it is. Top to our Layen's Hive. Only got one thing left and we're done. Alright, now that we've got our flashing on top of our lid here, we're going to make some vent holes in the sides here to let the moisture escape and the stale air get out of the beehive. In order to do that, I've marked 4 points, evenly spaced along the lid. I'm going to flip it upside down. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill these holes at a bit of an angle so that when it rains, if there's any water get in the hole, it would run right out. So I'm going to put it over to the edge here. I got the lid upside down. I'm going to be drilling down this way, but when I flip it over, it'll be facing out and down. So when I start this, using a 1/2 inch spade bit, and I get it just started, and then tip it. Get a hole just like that. I'll go ahead and drill the other 4 holes on this side. Then we'll flip it around, do the other holes, and I'll show you what's next. All right, as you can see, we have our 4 holes drilled here. We'll go ahead and get those cleaned up in a minute. But for now, I'm gonna flip it over. Take a look at the inside here. What we're going to do is I've cut some 8 pieces of window screen. So I'm going to put the window screen inside here in order to keep the bugs out from these holes. So I'll do the first one here for you. Just using the power shot with 3/8" staples. Sometimes this power shot doesn't shoot the staples all the way in, so just give them a little tap here. 1 done. 7 more to go. I'll get these done and we'll see what's next. Well, through the magic of video, this is already painted for us. And these are the last 2 pieces. This is 1/8" hardware cloth, or number 8 they call it. And basically this is going to cover the vent holes in the bottom and keep unwanted insects out and keep the bees in with some ventilation. And there it is, the completed Layen's hive. I'd live in there. This is B-Boy Bill, and if you like this hive build, please subscribe. Hi, I'm B-Boy Bill, and this is the One Saw Layen's frame. Hey guys, I'm super excited because I know a lot of you have been asking how to build a frame. You don't have all the same equipment I do, and I figured out how to do it with just one saw. So today I'm going to take you through that process and show you how I built this frame with one saw. I know some of you guys out there have made some comments on the safety of some of the techniques I'm using, and I hear you. I'm not the safest person in the world, and I'm sure my friends and family would agree with that. So because of that, I'm going to put this disclaimer up, and pretty much don't do anything you see here if it's not safe. All right, now that everybody knows you shouldn't do this at home, let's get to work. First thing we need to do is get our jig secured to the table. I'm right here, I'm lining it up with the edge of the workbench, and I'm going to use 1 1/4" screws to secure it to the table. What I'm working with here is a little guide I made just to get the drill holes in the right place of our stock. And our piece of 2x4 has been ripped down to the overall dimensions of the end bars, which is 15 and 9/16 inches. Basically, the whole idea of this little guide is just to make sure that the screws are hitting in the plywood at the same place every time so the holes don't get stripped out, and I can use this jig for a long time. I used a 9/64 inch drill bit to make the holes, and I'm putting 2-inch drywall screws right through the 2x4 and into the jig. It's super important to make sure that your 2x4 is right up against the rip fence of the jig so that the cuts will turn out perfectly. And with that in mind, it's time for the star of our show, the circular saw. So you can see I have my saw unplugged there, so I'm being as safe as I possibly can. And I'm going to adjust the blade so it's just hitting below that 2x4 and barely nicking the plywood below that. You don't want to put that into the plywood too far. And here we go, making our first cut. This is for the bottom bar. As you can see, I'm keeping the saw right up against the rip fence and all along the length of the 2x4. I thought it'd be a good idea to label these so that I don't get mixed up, especially if you're running these in batches, so that you know which is the top and which is the bottom. It's a good idea to keep your surface area clean when you're working with this jig, and here comes the magic. So just by moving this rip fence over, I have it preset, and I can put these right back in the holes, and we're going to go ahead and cut for the end bars. I will tell you that after you've run this a few times, these holes do get a little bit smoother to go. This is actually the third jig I was building as a prototype to get this project done, and I can definitely tell you that as things progressed, the holes got a lot smoother and everything worked a lot better. It's definitely not necessary to label the end bars. It's pretty clear that they're going to be end bars. They come out both the same. There's no rounded edges like that first cut on the 2x4. So probably not necessary to label those, but just because I was in the labeling mood, I'm going ahead and label them all. I'm going to slide that rip fence over to the next hole to cut the next end bar. And here we go. These end bars are about 3/8 inches thick, and the top and bottom bars are 3/4 inches thick. We're just going to line the rip fence up for the final cut here. This will be for our top bar. Get it lined right up, and we'll go ahead and give that a cut. And while I'm cleaning up my mess here, I'll have you take a look at the final products from the first cut. You see the top two are the sides, then the top, and then the bottom bars. Next thing, we're going to go ahead and remove the remaining 2x4 from the jig. We won't need this piece anymore. It'll go in the scrap pile for future builds. Now I've got a couple marks on the jig here for the exact length of the top bar and the bottom bar. Right now, everything's cut to the length of the end bar. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to mark the ends of the top and bottom bar so that I know where to cut them. The top bar is 14 5/16 inches long, and the bottom bar is going to be 12 3/16 inches long. The next step is to cut the top and bottom bar. And I'm lining them up here with the cut line, and I'm using these clamps. I love these clamps. If you don't have a set of these, check it out. I'll put a link down in the description under the tools, and you can just go and see the clamps on the B-Boy Build page. I have all my Amazon links there of all the products that I think people will be interested in. But these clamps are a definite must for this jig. I can't say enough about them. They save so much time, and they're super strong. Now that we have our top and bottom bar ripped to the length, we can go ahead and get our jig set up for the end bars. This little jig here just kind of offsets the rip fence a little bit so we can cut those narrower parts of the end bars. I'm securing it in place with a couple 2-inch screws. Next is a clamp to hold our work down, and I just secure this in place with another 2-inch drywall screw, using the drill at first, but in between each piece I usually use the regular Phillips head screwdriver. The clamp allows you to slide the end bar in from the end and then tighten it down. One important thing when tightening it down is to make sure that the material is up against the rip fence as tight as possible, and then just using a regular Phillips head, tighten that right down. I have a hole right in the middle of the frame that I use as a guide to drill the hole for the dowel in each end bar. It works great. Once the hole is drilled, the only thing left is to go ahead and cut the wood. I cut one side of the end bar, stopping at the edge of the jig. This worked perfect for my saw, but depending on your saw, you may have to adjust where you end your cut. I then flip the end bar over, secure, and make the cut down the other side. The process is exactly the same for both end bars. So once you get both of them done, you can move on to the next step, and that is removing the rest of the material. Because this is a one saw frame, I chose to use a chisel to remove the rest of the material instead of another saw. But if you have a coping saw laying around, that works just as well, if not better. You want to flip it over and remove the material on the other side as well. And then I like to clean mine up just a little bit. Once you're done removing the material on both the end bars, you should have 2 perfect end bars ready to go for your B frame. We're going to go ahead and remove the end bar unit and get this jig ready to finish up the top bar. Go ahead and mark the top bar 1 inch and 1/16 from either end. This is the material that's going to be removed. And I just put a line across here so it's easier to line up in the jig when we get to that point. Next thing we're going to do is slide that top bar up from the bottom of the jig, making sure the line is flush with the wood. If it's not completely flush at first, you can go ahead and give a couple taps with a hammer and get that line lined up perfectly. Here's a close-up view of how the wood is clamped and how the line just barely is flush with the plywood. This allows the material to be removed just at the line level. Go ahead and flip the material over and we'll repeat the process on the other side. Once that's done, we can get our clamp set up to clamp down our top bar and our bottom bar to finish these up. Here we are clamping in our bottom bar, and we're just going to cut it in half and actually make 2 bottom bars out of this one piece. We're going to remove our bottom bar from this jig, and we're going to get set up to do the top bar. Now the top bar needs a groove down the middle for a starter strip. So the first thing we need to do is get the saw blade depth set. And I'm doing that here. I drew a little line on the side, and I'm lining the blade up with that line so that I can have consistent cuts through all my top bars. Here's a picture of what the saw looks like as I'm setting the depth. You can see the black line there. That's how low I want the blade. And once I get that blade to where I want it, I lock it down, and it should be the perfect depth to do both the starter strip groove and also remove the remaining pieces of the top bar. Once your blade height's all set, I go ahead and clamp in the top bar and get ready to cut the groove for the starter strip. After removing the clamp, you can see the starter strip groove is perfectly cut into the top bar. I'm going to slide the top bar back into the jig, and I'm going to remove that little bit of material that's left on the end of the top bar. After that material is removed, I'm just going to flip it over and do the other side, and we'll be all done with the top bar. And there it is, all the pieces done with one saw and a jig. The only thing left to do is put your dowel in there and a starter strip. If you don't have a way to cut starter strips, you can order some popsicle sticks and use those, or you can actually use the wax starter strips and wire the frames up by drilling some holes in the sides. Well, now that you've seen the one saw frame jig in action, I'm sure your next question is, yeah, but how do I build that? I got you covered. The next video I put up is going to be how to build this one saw frame jig. So go ahead and click that subscribe button and that other little thing to let yourself know when I put this video up, and we'll go through how I built this. Thanks for watching, everybody, and if you found this content helpful, please click the like button. It does help a lot. We'll see you next time.